This is where we do top 5, and it's top 5 players that Jamie Carragher played against. Okay, so you've got your 5 ready. Shall we get cracking with
number 5?
Paolo Maldini.
Yes, along with Baresi, the two I look up to in terms of defenders, but I went for him because obviously I played against him. Champions League final, and I'll never forget, before the final, he actually must have done an interview, and he mentioned me in his interview, and I was like, oh my God, Maldini knows who I am. Like, oh, wow. And I've actually got his shirt from the final.
The 05?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. When you got his shirt, was he not a little bit upset?
No, they left everything in the dressing room. They left the medals, the shirt, everything. So we had a lot of young lads there who'd come on the trip, and they just went in and raided the dressing room. So I got Maldini's shirt out of it.
Well, obviously they were really upset, but at half-time, were they giving it the big one, thinking they'd done it?
No,
Was that not
I mean, these things, because of Istanbul, it's a myth and all these things. They were too experienced and too quality people, men and footballers to get too carried away like that. Of course, anyone at 3-0, you probably think you're going to want to win the game. That's normal, but no, there was none of that singing and screaming in the dressing room. That was just nonsense.
Okay, let's crack on. Maldini's your number 5.
Number 4.
And this surprised me, John Terry, because all the attacking players, brilliant attacking players you played against in your career, that's another centre-half, John Terry at number 4. Why?
Yeah, I think he was, for me, the best centre-back of the Premier League era. I think he was my type of player. He's basically a better version of me, if I'm being honest. And I think his football ability is massively underrated. He's a great player. You know, you're with England and when you see him on the ball and in small-sided games, he's a top-quality player. So, and when I was going through my list, I didn't have an English player in there, so I was thinking of English players I'd played when I wanted to get someone in there. And I thought I'd go for John Terry because I couldn't put Stevie in.
He was two-footed, wasn't he? He could pass a ball.
Switch the ball with his left foot, 40, 50 yards. He's that part of his... I always felt with him and Rio, it was always John Terry was the defender and Rio was the footballer, whereas Rio was a much better defender than he was given credit for. And I think John Terry was a much better footballer than he was given credit for.
So you'd have Terry just ahead of Rio, would you?
Yes.
Okay, interesting. Let's crack on.
Number 3.
Love him. Spoke to him for the book. We're actually in contact now. We text each other. Well, I text him, basically.
All friends.
Yeah, exactly. Get that on social media trending. But he's... no, I love him as a player. I think he's the greatest midfield player I can think of. I think if you said to me, name the best midfielder, I'd go for Xavi. He was player of the tournament in World Cups and Euros when Spain dominated what Barcelona did. And I've interviewed him once for the paper. It was a big thing for me, and I got hold of him for the book. So Xavi is in this book talking about Barcelona beating Manchester United at Wembley. So it was a great honour for me to speak to him, because for me he's number 1 in terms of midfielders.
Ahead of Gerrard?
Yes, completely different player. And you see what Stevie did for us. What I would always say is Stevie got goals and did all that, but what Stevie did for Liverpool, him and all of us for England couldn't then take that onto a World Cup stage. And, you know, when you talk about like the absolute elite, whereas Xavi's game at Barcelona was completely different, about keeping the ball and getting the team playing. No one could stop him doing what he did. You couldn't do it. You couldn't stop Xavi running a game. It was impossible. So he did that in World Cup finals, where he did every week for Barcelona. So he did it. He played his part or what his game was at every level of football. Did
you rate the other lad in midfield, Iniesta? Was he?
Yes, and it was always a debate with us in the dressing room and the Spanish lads there who was better, Iniesta or Xavi. But I'd nailed me colours to the mast with Xavi early on. I couldn't change.
And how far behind was Xabi Alonso?
Probably then, just the next rung down, I would say. I think they probably just had the edge on him, but he eventually actually gets himself into that midfield, and Xavi ended up playing further forward in number 10 position, I think, when they won the World Cup, and that just shows his quality as well, to get in that Spain team that, you know, won the first trophy, which I think was 2008.
Xavi at 3.
Number 2.
Got to be in there. Played against him as he was a young lad. He certainly wasn't the Messi of the Pep team, but we played against the Barcelona team, who were reigning European champions in 2007. They won it 2006, and Messi was on the right wing. Ronaldinho was on the left wing, and Samuel Eto'o was up front. So it was some front three, and we beat them in the Nou Camp 2-1, and we lost at home 1-0. I had a good chance to score, but we went through on the away goal. So come up against Messi, and we did okay against him. But I mean, he's just an absolute god. So there's no way I could not put him in my top 5.
Ridiculous. So who's the big one?
Number 1.
This was the one I guessed. Thierry Henry.
I think everyone guessed this one. I think he's. I think most people would agree with me. I think he's the greatest player to ever play in the Premier League. I think the Arsenal team of that era, I still say, is the best team I ever played against. Even thinking of Milans and Madrids and Barças in Europe, that was still the best team I played against. And possibly, it did underachieve in terms of Champions League. Never quite got one. And I always remember. I went to London with my wife to do a bit of shopping and anything and get away from Liverpool. Must have had a couple of days off, so I'm, not as many people know me around there. So I'm just walking, carrying a couple of bags, and there's traffic congestion everywhere as it normally is in London. And I just turned to my left, and there was a taxi driver there, and he'd obviously seen me and gone out of his way to get a bit of piece of paper and just write Thierry Henry in block capitals, and he just had it out the window. And I'm just stood there in the middle of London with bags in my hand. My wife's looking at me, and I'm like, oh my God, I can't get away from this fella. And the fella just drove away laughing, and I'm like, oh my God. But he was fantastic, and definitely the toughest player I ever came up against, and I think the best player in the world for a year or two, in my opinion, around that era with Arsenal.
Yeah, it was terrific. And there was that game, it was Good Friday, I think, at Highbury, when you were 2-1 up at half-time.
It's 1858 and 53. You better get through this story. You've only got a minute. If I keep talking, you'll only get about 10 seconds.
He did that to a lot of players, though, to be fair, didn't he?
Yes, and a lot of players who were a lot better than me.